Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Your Spiritual Journey. This is Dr. Bob, and this is the space and the place where we talk about things important to your soul. And before I introduce today's guest, I do want to mention that we've had a number of episodes that relate to your pets. And I just thought I'd give you some background on that so that if this podcast interests you, you may want to take a look at a few others. Our very first podcast, episode number 1, was with Dr. Doug Knieven. He's a veterinarian and he uses acupuncture. And it's not too many veterinarians that you can take your pet to where they're going to get acupuncture. Episode number 5 with Sharon Madison is pretty interesting because she is a pet communicator and is often able to help pet owners understand what their pet's issues are and how to fix them. Episode number 112 with Cheryl Beeler is also having to do with pets and using aromatherapy on your pets. And episode number 121 with Mark Anthony talks about pet spirits and working with pets and being able to help reunite people with their pets after the person has died or the pet has died. Today's guest, Barbara Ahern, is someone who has gone through quite a few different vocations as a massage therapist, a holistic spa technician, then a Bowen practitioner. She opened a massage school and contacted graduates for outcalls, and she's got a Sierra Spa and Wellness Retreat. So after working with people for 15 years, she discovered an 84% correlation of physiology between people and dogs, validating that natural medicine benefits the animals too. So she started working with dogs, and she designed a health and wellness program, Canine AcuTouch, that addresses their issues. So if you think about acupuncture and then sort of take that to another level, and we'll find out about Canine AcuTouch in a minute. So last year she injured her knee, couldn't get down on the floor with the dogs, and she thought her career was over. But then a friend said, why not work on the dogs remotely like you have worked on me remotely? She tried it and it worked. So now she has a lot of remote work and has helped her canine clients as far away as England. So I'm also going to be sure to mention the Shared Vision Project, but we'll get into that in a bit too. So I'm going to stop talking at this point and introduce you to Barbara Ahern and let her tell you her story. Barbara, the mic's all yours.
Okay. Thank you, Bob. First of all, I wanted to mention that the caliber of folks that you have interviewed on your show is quite impressive, and to be invited to this interview is a real honor. So thank you so much. I appreciate it. Going way back to from the beginning, I can't say as a very young child that I really had a spiritual connection other than, being raised Catholic when I was a child, going to church and doing everything that you do as a little Catholic girl and getting, uh, the sacraments in the church. I have to say that I've always felt a connection, like there was something deeper um, with animals that I felt. Um, I, I still to this day say that animals are sent here for our education, and there's a little saying that says that they don't live as long as we do because they already know love and acceptance and forgiveness, so they don't have to stay as long. So my my wish when I was a child was to be able to talk to the animals. I always wanted to do that. I thought that would be the most fascinating thing ever. And another thing that I wanted was to make a difference in the lives of people and or animals. And hopefully, I would say that I was able to get both of those wishes come true. So, um, really uneventful up until the time I went to college, and I changed my major many times, and I didn't really knew what I wanted to be when I grew up. And so first it was a forest ranger, a little too much science involved in that. I didn't make it through that, so I decided I wanted to be a surveyor. And when it got to trig and all that, it was a little too much to handle, so I changed my major again. And I ended up getting a degree in social science with a minor in English. Unless I wanted to pursue even more college, I would have probably ended up being a teacher, which isn't so bad, but I ended up teaching in another capacity later on in life. So when I went to, after I went to college, I did just a routine of one job to another. Well, I shouldn't say that. I worked for the phone company for several years, and then I took an early retirement from that, and then I went to work for the state. Um, I I sustained an injury at the state, and I went for all kinds of therapies that weren't working for me. It was just the regular cycle, this and this and this, and physical therapy and medication and all this, and then that didn't work, so they tried the routine over again. And the only thing that helped me was when I had a massage. That's the only thing that took the pain and the strain and the stress and the tension away from the muscles that were pinched, that were closing off, the function of my nerve in my neck. And because I had that relief, I thought, if I ever get over this pain, if I ever overcome this, I want to do something to help other people the way this helped me. So another dream come true. I ended up taking a rehab. Well, actually, I was retrained in another position instead of having to go back to work for the state, which is, I don't think, anybody's lifelong dream. So finally knew what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I went to school to be a massage therapist, and I loved it. And I ended up opening my own massage school. And then the students that I trained, the graduates that followed all the rules and did all of their externship, and I they were kind of the ones that graduated with honors, and I ended up contracting back with them, and then we had a very successful business in the foothills of the Sierras called Sierra Spa and Wellness Retreat. So because I trained them. I knew exactly what I was sending out in my behalf, because my name was very important to me, my reputation. And so the education that I got in the San Francisco Bay Area in Emeryville from an institute called the National Holistic Institute, it was first class. It was top of the line. It was the best school to go to here on the West Coast. And when I had gone to my rehab counselor, um, he said, "Well, you're going to be retrained, Barb. So what would you like to be retrained in?" And I said, first of all, I said, "Well, I think I'd like to be a surveyor." No, not a surveyor. I said, "I think I would like to be an X-ray technician." And he said, "No, you can't do that, because you'd have to be responsible for making sure people didn't fall off the table. You'd have to be able to catch them. You can't do that with your injuries." Okay, right. I wasn't going to do that. "Okay, I'll be a real estate appraiser." And he says, "Do you have a degree in real estate? A license?" And I said, "No, I thought all you do was go through the houses and just check, these boxes." He said, "No, doesn't work like that." I
Little
said,
more to
"Okay,
it than
well
that.
then." Yeah, I said, "Well then, I really would like to become a massage therapist, but I don't know if I'm able to do that." And he said, "Well, yeah, that's a real possibility for you. However, the amount of money in the budget for what you're allowed for the rehab is only this much." And I said, "Okay, let me look around to see what schools." And I did, and I ended up going to NHI, and I said, "That's the school I want." And the counselor said, "Well, I hate to break it to you, Barb, but that's like 3 times the budget that you have for your training, and you can't afford to go to that school." And I said, "You know what? I'm going to go to that school." Because that's the best, and that's what I really want. And he said, I don't know how to tell you, but we can't do that." So I ended up going to the school. Uh, I applied for and received a grant um, to pay for the full tuition. And then I thought, okay, how am I going to get to that school? I mean, I live hours and hours away from it. So I I thought, well, I was feeling confident, so I put in an application for a student loan that would cover the amount of the amount of the tuition, that's how much we were allowed on a student loan. And I was able to get a place in the San Francisco Bay Area that most people would only be able to covet. And it was on the 23rd floor of a high rise condo building that overlooked the San Francisco Bridge, the Bay Bridge, and the Berkeley Marina. Uh, and that's because I asked for it.
Yeah.
I was going by the school one day, and I remember looking up at that building, thinking, you know what? If I lived right here, I would be 5 minutes from campus. I wouldn't have to get up 2.5 hours ahead of time. I'd be able to just go and take care of things and come back and like that. So I ended up just by saying, wouldn't it be nice to be right there? And focusing my intention and my thought, and then just letting it go. It ended up, I was ready to sign a lease at a place that was at least an hour and a half away. And my friend called and she said, "You didn't sign a lease yet, did you, Barb?" And I said, "I'm just getting ready to. They're running a credit check in the other room right now." She said, "Don't sign that lease." She said, "Our girlfriend's boyfriend has a condo in that complex that you were talking about, and he has somebody leaving, and he's going to give you a deep discount because you're a friend of our friend." And so that's how that happened. And
All right, I've got
I
a
ended up,
question about that because
yeah,
you obviously manifested a dream that you had here. Had you done any research or reading about how to manifest what you want?
No, I never had. At that point, I never had. However, uh, later on, there was a friend of mine who told her husband, she said, there's a new movie out. It's called The Secret. And I think she says, I can't wait to tell Barbara about it. And he says, why would you tell Barbara? She's already living it. And so anyway, that's how things
Yeah.
have happened in my life, is that I you know, I just had the thought and then I let it go. But I never realized that was the process, for men.
Yeah.
And so many things happen that way. So I went to school there, and I became a massage therapist. I opened a school and then trained my practitioners and sent them out to the Airbnbs in little Amador County, which was the seat of where the first Airbnb opened, in California. And we had a very successful practice. And then as I was doing the work and working side by side of my graduates, I remember thinking, excuse me, that that I wanted a little something more. And I had heard about a therapy called Bowen therapy from Australia that was just coming to the US. And that therapy was something that worked with the nervous system, balancing the nervous system and stimulating the immune system and helping the body self-correct with a very light, gentle touch, just a touch that is just below the surface of the skin. So in doing that, there you go. So you just make a very small circle on the skin, and you're just trying to activate and awaken the fascia, the nerve tissue and the fascia between the skin and the muscle. So it's very gentle. And so I had heard all kinds of wonderful results from this work, and I decided to check it out. And when I went there, when I went to the school, the gentleman that trained me was someone who had taken his wife to Australia to find out if this therapy could help her. And he ended up bringing it here to the US. And I took the instruction from him. And he told us as a class one time that he said, I've gotten calls from the head surgeon at UCSF, University of California, San Francisco Teaching Hospital. He says, I need to ask you what you're doing to my patients. And the teacher said, well, who wants to know? In other words, like, what happened? And so he said, their heart problems are disappearing. And you're the only thing that all these patients have in common. So I was so fascinated by that work that I decided to start taking courses in it. And he had all these miracle stories. And I thought, well, maybe that'll happen for you. And I don't think that'll happen for me. So I ended up, it's so simple and so gentle and so passive that you think, well, certainly I can't be doing anything that's going to make a difference, because with massage it's all hands on.
Right.
But with this work, very gentle touching, and then you have to remove yourself away from the client, at least 6 feet away, for a 2-minute span. And that 2 minutes is called a therapeutic pause. And so it allows the signal that you gave to one part of the body to send a feedback, a loop to the brain to say, okay, I'm giving you a new message. You need to listen to this. And then it sends a signal back to the nervous system that says, okay, I got it. Now let's build on the next one. So it was not my idea of comfortable when I had to remove myself from the client, because massage is all about let's make everything better. But we had to really respect, this therapy was different. We had to respect that time that the body needed to respond. And so I ended up being comfortable with that, and even in my mind had a 2-minute clock, and I would wait in between. One of my very first clients was a woman who had been in a serious car accident the year before, and she had lost her husband in the accident. And she called me and she said, I have been in pain for over a year and nothing has helped me. And they keep doing the same things and they've done all that they can. And I was wondering if I could get a massage from you. And I said, well, I can certainly give you a massage, but I said, I'd like to ask you if you'd be open to something different. Because massage I would offer to my clients who needed R&R, who needed some tension released, who needed to have, just to be able to feel good after that. With Bowen therapy, it got to the core of the issue and worked from the inside out. And she agreed to allow me to work on her, and I did a series. And in that series, I think I saw her for just four sessions, and they were like between one and the first one was 1 week, and then the second treatment was 2 weeks apart, and then 3 weeks, and then 4. And in this time, she had come to me. She couldn't stand up straight. She was walking like that, and she had a drag to one of her feet. Like, I don't mean to say it terribly, but to make you imagine the hunchback who would be bent over and dragging his foot. And so one day on the table, she hollered, and I thought, oh my gosh. And so I said, just lie there calmly. It's okay. It will pass. This is just like when the body adjusts itself. Sometimes it's simple, and sometimes you feel like you've been hit by a truck. And so she overcame that. I said, I can stop. She said, no, please continue. And she got up off the table after that session, and instead of standing like this, she was standing straight up. And she started walking. And I said, because I would have them walk after the treatment. And she said, she started walking and she hunched over again. And I said, what are you doing? She says, I'm walking around the table. And I said, no, don't walk the way you remember. Walk the way your body can. It feels crooked right now, but the more you do that, the more in line it will be. And so she stood up straight and walked around the table straight. And that's how she stayed. The last session I saw her, she said, I have released all my depression. I don't have depression anymore. I don't have, my blood pressure has regulated. My heart rate has calmed down. She lost 40 pounds during that, I think a 3-month period that I saw her, 2 or 3 months. And because she had been quite large. And the last session she came in, she told me, she said, Barb, I just came from my doctor who showed me the MRI, the last MRI that he took. And he looked at my chart and he said, this can't be your chart and your MRI because they don't match. And she said, what do you mean? He said, when you were in that accident, you broke your neck in 2 places. And he said, that never goes away on an MRI. And he said, there's no evidence you ever had trauma to your neck. I got the chills just now, by the way. That spirit saying, that's right. You did it for the right reason. Yeah. So I would honestly say that was, I call her the little miracle child. And when my instructor said these things can happen for you, I never thought they could, but I believed, I trusted. And when people tell me, they say, well, take this pain away, or, I've got a golf game coming up. I need you to fix my shoulder. And I said, well, it is client participation. And so, and I said, it's not me. It's, the practitioner is just the conductor, just Ben Franklin's key. The energy comes through us, not from us. And so I've always appreciated and respected that and honored that as a gift that is carried, not a gift that is owned. And so I do, oh, God, another Joe. So I do believe that if you're in it for the right reasons, you
Yeah.
you will be shown. Yeah.
So I'm
So,
just curious because you do some of this work or a lot of this work now remotely,
mhm.
and if it requires even for you to touch the person initially before you back off, how do you do that remotely?
That's a very good question, Bob. um, Initially, when I started doing this work, I assumed, and I do believe many have assumed, that it's necessary for energy medicine, which this was ahead of its time, I believe, um, to work without hands on. And only just a matter of years ago, a few years ago, well, first of all, Bowen came to the US right around the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s. And that was just what we did as a practitioner. That's what we did.
Mhm.
Now, when I ended up hurting myself and I could not get, let me go back a little bit. After I worked with people, in the spa, and then I became a Bowen practitioner. I was so fascinated by that, and this therapy helped so many people that again, I was ready for another step up. I just wanted something more. Even though this was very successful and I really loved what I was doing, I had a web designer ask me one time. She said, Barb, if you could do anything and live anywhere, what would you do and where would you be? And I said, okay, since this is hypothetical, I'd like to work with dogs and I'd like to live in Carmel by the Sea, which is on the central coast of California, the most beautiful place. And she said, well, then why don't you do it? I said, what? What are you talking about? I don't know anything about dogs other than the fact that I just love them. And there's no way I could afford to live in Carmel by the Sea. And so she said, you could do it if you want to. And I said, no, I can't. She said, yes, you can. I said, no, I can't. She said, yes, you can. So just to prove her wrong, just to prove her wrong, I decided that I was going to make an attempt at that. And so I started, I decided to take like an online course of working with doing Bowen on dogs. And it was very awkward, even though I had pretty much mastered the work over the years on people. The translation from human to animal, it was uncomfortable for me. And so it took me a while to get comfortable with that, at least 6 months. And while I was doing that, I still wasn't really comfortable at it, and I decided to make uh, to have a workshop, a presentation of working on the dogs in front of an audience of people at this little holistic animal food store. It's called Raw Connection, and there were 30 people that signed up. Now, I they all brought their dogs with them, and I did a demonstration on one of the dogs. Now I did the demonstration. Now I tell you, Bob, I wasn't really well versed at the time, but I did it anyway. I thought, oh man, I don't know if this is going to work. So I did the demonstration. I did the moves upside down, inside out, backwards. I left some things out, and it worked anyway. So I thought, oh my God. Because one of the little dogs that was there that I did the demo on, that dog had hostility issues and barking issues and issues with a gait that was off. And when we finished the session and that dog started to walk, it was like a changed animal. And all these people saw that. And when I witnessed that, it even surprised me. And so I got bookings from every one of those people that were at that
Yeah.
presentation, and just the bookings from that presentation gave me work for a whole year to live in the most beautiful place ever, Carmel Valley. So, and then that's when I wrote the program on for the dogs, the Canine AcuTouch, because it's a hybrid of Bowen therapy. So Bowen therapy works on the nervous system and the immune system, and it just wakes up the body and it encourages it to self-heal. All we're doing is just being a catalyst to make the the already uh, a healing mechanism just come to life for these
Yeah.
animals. And so it's Bowen, and it's acupressure. Well, I call it AcuTouch because you're not actually doing any pressure. You can do this on any animal, no matter their age, their size, their condition, and it's not going to hurt them because the touch is so light and so gentle. So that's not sustained pressure like acupressure. And you don't have to have it really accurate like acupuncture. You have to be a quarter of an inch away from the intended point for acupuncture, or you're not going to get the results that you want. But with canine AcuTouch, what you're doing is you're just putting your attention and your very gentle touch on that point or near that point, and it radiates out and it takes care of all of the tissue around it. So, you know, they say that close counts in horseshoes, hand grenades, and Bowen. So, so close enough. And so, and then it also coincides with the work that we do here in the U.S., which I discovered when I was writing this program, that there's an intersection of where Bowen moves are performed, and they're performed on the points of the body, which is where they do acupuncture and acupressure. And that coincides with the US American trigger point philosophy. The trigger points release tendons, fascia, release all kinds of stress in the body in large areas. So if you touch this, then it's going to affect masses of tissue and an area that's much larger than just a point. So, so I actually combined all these, and when the work is done, I don't know if you can see this, but when the work is done, there are points on the body that if you do that work on these points, then the training that I instilled was to be able to know exactly what you're affecting when you touch any of these points. Whereas with Bowen, you do this, you step away. Oh, that's nice. But this way, you know exactly what you're affecting with each point that you touch. And that was something that I never got when I took my Bowen training. I said, well, why do you do this here? Oh, because Tom Bowen said so. He would never have said that. But that's because they didn't have the answer. I think that's because they just said, okay, teacher, I'll do it like that. I'll do it like that. So, all right. So anyway, so I wrote that program. And then I moved to, I did that when I was in Carmel. And then I moved to the San Francisco Bay Area of Emory, Mill Valley, which is right near San Francisco. And I started doing my work there. And that work ended up working. I did Guide Dogs for the Blind. I was introduced to Guide Dogs for the Blind from doing a presentation at one of the massage colleges, one that I went to. National Holistic. I introduced this work to the students there, and they were fascinated by it. And so then the only way that I was able to do a presentation on one of those animals, on a dog, is the school said, I'm sorry, we can only have service dogs in here. You can't just bring any dog in here. And I thought, well, I always wanted to work with Guide Dogs for the Blind. Maybe they'll let me take a dog. And or have an administrator come and talk about the program. And they said, we can do something better than that. How would you like to work with one of our recipients that has a guide dog? Someone who's blind and he has his dog. And he can really tell your students exactly how important that dog is to him, and how he'd do anything to help his dog. So, man, I thought, wow, hallelujah. I didn't even think to ask for that because I thought there's no way they would do that. And they did, they
Yeah.
offered that. That's when I did the presentation, and you could hear a pin drop in there. And after that, I started working volunteer work at Guide Dogs for the Blind using this therapy on them. And if you've ever had an experience behind the scenes of a place like that, the dogs go through so much. They are heroes before they even get to the point of working with their recipient as a guide dog. They go through so many lives. They go through puppy raising for the first, year of their life, and they're protected and they're loved, and then they have to be given up. And then they're in, I don't like to call it incarceration, but they're in a situation where they're in the kennels again, and they don't know why. They don't know what they did to deserve that. And then they go into training, and the training is so intense and difficult in a very short period of time because there's so much demand on those dogs that they turn them out so quickly. And some of these dogs don't make it. They mentally can't accept it, or the responsibility that they have is just, it shortens their lifespan. So I thought, this is the best thing. And that's why I sent you a little, I think a flip book, a link to a flip book. And it talks in the very front, I dedicate that book to those courageous canines whose lives are dedicated to service.
Yeah.
So anyway, so as far as what happened in doing it from not touching to touching, touching to not touching, is when I injured my knee, I was in the Bay Area. I had a career there. I was working with the dogs and wonderful results with these dogs. And then I ended up having a knee injury. I fell down the steps and had a knee injury, and I couldn't get down on the floor with the dogs. And then a friend of mine told me from back east, from North Carolina, she said, "Barb, why don't you do the work like you've done on me remotely?" And I said, "Well, I had done some work on her because she had moved away and she needed some work done." And I said, "Here's the thing. You told me that you had wonderful results from the work, but," I said, "you can lie to me. A dog can't lie." And I said, if I do this work and nothing happens, I would be devastated." And she said, "I think you should try it." And here's how two things happened simultaneously. One of them was um, the day that I was supposed to work on that dog, that evening, I was supposed to work on that dog. I decided, I had dabbled in animal, uh, being a psychic for animals. I took a class on that long time ago, and I played around with it a little bit. I never really did anything serious with it. And I thought, now's a good time. I better check in with that big guy and ask him what's going on. And so I thought I would try it. That's the only way that I've ever learned anything, is just stepping out into it, ready or not,
Yeah.
and usually not. So I decided I would quiet my mind and just I think I put on some vibrational music, YouTube music that would kind of put me deeper into subconscious, or just be able to contact him. So I did that. And what the animals do for me is there's no words. They show me pictures. And he took me around his body and he showed me what was going on with him. And the way dogs convey things, we really place the bar way too high for them because they're very simple creatures. So he had what's called laryngeal paralysis, where the flaps of the muscle flaps close when they're trying to breathe, and then they open when they're trying to eat. So it makes it to where they can get pneumonia, or the food and the water goes down. And when they're trying to breathe, when they're walking, and then when they try to breathe, they suck in, and then and then those flaps are like sails because the muscle control has gone. And also because it's a neurological issue, it affects the nervous system as a whole, and so their back end starts to, lose control. They don't have any. They waddle a little bit. They don't have, the musculature because their nerves are either lazy or starting to, completely stop functioning. And so he told me, well, he conveyed to me, no words, he conveyed to me that the issue in his throat was bothersome, and that he didn't understand why the caboose is not behaving. So it was his way of telling me that, they don't, that's how they talk to me. They don't get all in a panic mode, because they take things a lot easier than we do. So that night I worked on him remotely. And what I did was, this is how I work remotely, because this is energy work, and it does translate so well, so at a distance. It's always been possible to do this remotely, but I think most Bowen practitioners, including myself, didn't realize that until just recently, till everything started being, much more accepting that way. Bob, because you do Reiki. So anyway, so I imagined my hands on the dog, just doing the moves as if he was right in front of me, right under my hands, actually. And when I went there, I could actually feel my hands on him. And the most wonderful thing was, I saw him upside down, just like spread eagle. And he took a deep breath, and we both took that breath at the same time. It's like I took his breath. When he sighed like that, I was sighing. We were one in that moment. And I've never felt anything like that before. And so the next morning, I thought, geez, I wonder if this made a difference for him. And the next morning, I thought, I'm going to go ahead and check in with him once more before I call his mom and find out what she saw, if anything. And before I could even check in to ask him if it was okay, if we communicate, I in my mind's eye, I saw him running up to me. He just ran right up to my face, and he had his leash in his mouth, and he was wagging his back end, or the tail was wagging the dog, and he was excited, and he was energetic, and he wasn't panting, and he was ready for a walk. He was just ready, like a little young puppy. Yeah. And I thought, oh my gosh, wait till I tell her. Well, meantime, she sent me a text and a picture. A video. She said, you know what, Barb? This morning, Rupert got up, and he brought his leash to me, and he was just wagging his back end, and he was so ready for a walk. She said, I can't believe the change. And then she sent me the video that showed him just like that the day before before I worked on him that evening. And then she showed me a video of him after their walk, and he was just breathing like you and me. And I thought, oh my gosh, it works. It worked. So I learned that I was able to communicate with him, as well as being able to work with him across the miles. So yeah, like I said, they can't lie.
So like can you tell me a little bit about this Shared Vision project and what that's about?
The Shared Vision project is bringing awareness to the work that is done with the service animals. There are so many people that, of course, and rightfully so, acknowledge the fact that the programs that train the dogs to service people, whether they're blind or deaf or uh, in a wheelchair or that have conditions, even as what am I trying to think of? Autistic children. So all these dogs are trained to help these people with their issues so that they can live more normal lives.
Yeah.
And I think that's wonderful. These organizations are great. So the dogs help these people, and who helps the dogs? So what I saw when I was working at Guide Dogs for the Blind behind the scenes is something that everybody should be privy to. They should all be able to see what these dogs go through in order to make the lives of their recipients better. And so the shared vision is this work promoted all over the world, but especially with the training facilities that get these dogs ready to turn them out for a life that's going to be more than anybody would have imagined. It kind of reminds me of a young man going into the service and going into battle. He goes in as an 18-year-old boy and he comes out as a man and seeing things that nobody should ever see. But it makes him old by the time he gets out. Well, when these dogs go in for their training, and they go through such a rigorous training, you would think that that would be the hardest thing. But the hardest thing with their whole life journey is the job they're about to embark on. And there have been some of these dogs that either don't make the grade, so they don't graduate because it's quite intense, or I spoke to one client who said, one recipient who said that they're on their third dog already because the first one couldn't handle the cold because they lived in Alaska. See, you don't know what happens when these dogs leave this nice, wonderful environment, San Rafael. Couldn't handle the cold. Another one had a mental collapse. Happens with dogs too. Couldn't handle the responsibility. And then they're on their third one now. So you see, there, got another chill. There has to be something. It has to be acknowledged what these dogs go through for the good of the people that they work for.
Yeah.
And anything that can help them, to extend their life and to make it easier and to make it more, stress-free, because they do go through so much stress. And so when I did have when I had the recipient at my first presentation, and I had people volunteer to come in with their dogs every time I did a presentation at one of these schools, and they all said, Barb, anything that you can do for my dog, or anything that maybe even I can learn to do for my dog, I would be indebted for life, because we are one. My dog and I are one, and I wouldn't be here with them. So that's basically the shared vision is just acknowledgement, recognition of the dogs who dedicate their lives to service.
So I imagine there's a website for the Shared Vision Project. I mean, how does somebody help support this?
It would just be through the site, the Canine AcuTouch site. So it's just canineacutouch.com. And they can also get in touch with me. I'm rewriting the training program now. So people who are interested in learning how to do this on the dogs, they would do it hands-on first, and that would give them the confidence that they had. And then the next training, which I haven't even fathomed yet, but I know that will come to me as well. Actually, I did teach one person who lived in North Carolina how to do the work remotely, and she got excellent results with it. So training on learning how to do this, but even on being able to fund the project taking this out to all the different training facilities that teach these dogs how to work with their recipients and be with them for at least the rest of the dog's life, their
Yeah.
working life. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a little bit familiar with a program for veterans who have PTSD and dogs
Yes.
being trained to help them. Uh,
Yes. That was one of my clients, that one of the recipients that you know how sometimes you ask for something and then they say you look at the
yeah,
door, and instead of the door, something coming through the door, it's like there's a window back here and it came through there. And so that's how this happened with the PTSD client, not a client, but a recipient that had one of the dogs. I went to a Japanese restaurant one time, and I was sitting at the sushi bar, and there was a gentleman that came in with his wife, and he had a dog, and they sat next to me. He was sitting next to me, and the wife was on the other side. And that was at the time when I was looking for another candidate, for doing another presentation. And I told him, I asked him, you're not supposed to do this, by the way, but I asked him, I said, what does your service dog do for you? And why do you have a service dog? But just to let you know, etiquette, you're not supposed to ask that. I asked it anyway. And so he said, well, I have PTSD. And he said, my dog protects me, keeps me safe, circles me when I'm in a crowd. And because I always feel like somebody's coming up behind me. And he said, there was a time when I woke up in the middle of the night, and I had my hands around my wife's neck. And he said, because I was having a nightmare that it was, that I was back in the service and it was the enemy. He said, my dog saved my wife, and he saved me from doing that. And he said, I would give my life for this dog. And so I said, would you mind coming in for a presentation that I'm going to be giving to some people at a school that talks about things that can be done to help these dogs deal with their stresses while they're helping you? And he said, well, I really appreciate that, but he said, I can't do that because I can't be around crowds. I said, I totally understand that. I understand that. And then, so I continued my dinner, and about 15 minutes later, he said, I just spoke with my wife, and he said, we'd be happy to come to your presentation. And when that presentation was done, he gave his story about him and his dog. And there were a lot of people that came to that presentation, and they came through a terrible raging thunderstorm to get there. And while he was speaking, you could hear a pin drop. And after that presentation, there was a young man that went up to him and talked to him about his PTSD. And these two shared a bond that only they can understand. And that young man called me later because he had my number, and he said, I want to thank you for introducing me to this gentleman and his dog. He said, making that connection was my first step in getting over my issues, because he said, I haven't talked to anybody about this since I've been back.
Yeah.
So, see, those kind of connections, when you do it for the right reason, spirit is around you, over you, in you, through you, all the time. So I honestly think that working with the dogs is a gift that was given to me by spirit. And I'm always consciously reminded when things like that happen. So,
well, I want to thank you for all the wonderful work that you do. It was at Cheryl Beller's request that I talked to you, and I'm so glad I did. So at this point in the podcast, we're at the end. So this is your opportunity to leave our audience with any words of wisdom that you'd like to leave them with.
Well, couple of things I would say. Anybody can speak to the animals. Anybody can talk to them. We all have that ability, and that ability we were born into. We were born with the ability to speak without words and to connect with each other on a much deeper basis than the physical reality that many people think that's all there is. So I believe intention is the most important thing to have. And your intention of wanting to do something and just asking for that gift. If you stay focused on that, it will be presented to you. Again, from that window back there, not from that door over there that you're waiting to open. So just be ready for it in any sense, because you never know when it's going to come up and surprise you, tap you on the shoulder and say, is this what you've been looking for? So, like that.
Okay, audience. As always, take what resonates with you and incorporate it into your life, and put the rest on a shelf until you're ready to deal with it. Until next time, this has been your spiritual journey.